This is One Sentence News, a daily podcast featuring 3 news stories with a sentence-long summary and 1 sentence of context apiece. I'm Colin Wright. This is a sponsored message. I've been using Anchor as my podcast host for a while now, and it's been a pleasure to use. Anchor offers benefits that most other hosts do not. It's free to use, but it also has a collection of tools that allow you to create a podcast completely within the Anchor website or smartphone app. They distribute your show to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other distribution channels without any additional effort on your part, and you can make money from your podcast without any minimum audience size. So you can use it as a more traditional podcast host like I do, but it's also got everything you need to start a podcast from scratch. If you're keen to give it a shot, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. It's Friday, July 29th, 2022. Let's talk about the news. From the New York Times, Manchin, in reversal, agrees to quick action on climate and tax plan. This is one of those big if true stories, as although it's true in the sense that what's being reported is legitimate, the politician at the center of the story has changed his mind and stance on this issue so many times that his relationship to his party, the Democrats, has often been compared to that of Peanuts cartoon character Lucy holding the football for Charlie Brown, who runs to kick the ball, only to have Lucy pull it away at the last second every single time. That said, Senator Joe Manchin has announced that he's come to an agreement with the rest of his party to push a $739 billion package of climate and energy programs, healthcare subsidies, and funding that would help lower the cost of prescription drugs, and which could be passed using the reconciliation process, which basically means they could pass it without any Republican support. If this package, called the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, goes through, and there's reason to believe the Democrats will try to push it through sometime next week, it would result in $369 billion for climate and energy proposals, cut federal spending on prescription drugs by about $288 billion, and raise around $451 billion in new taxes over the next decade. It would ultimately reduce the federal deficit by about $300 billion, while ostensibly at least, also helping everyday Americans with inflation-related issues. There is likely to be a lot of discussion and press centered on this proposal in the coming days, but the high-level summary right now is that everyone's surprised. Everyone is skeptical of Manchin's claims that this is something he'll support because of his recent history of such claims, and scuttling of previous similar Democratic efforts. And some analysts are seeing this as a potential feather in President Biden's cap if he decides to run for re-election in 2024, as it would be a significant policy success. From The Verge, DeepMind found the structure of nearly every protein known to science. A specialized piece of AI software called AlphaFold has allowed an Alphabet subsidiary company called DeepMind to create a database of essentially every protein structure known to modern science, and they are releasing that database to the public for free. This is one of those stories that sounds vaguely neat in a techie sense, but which is actually a huge deal for fundamental scientific research. And I did a Let's Know Things podcast episode on the protein folding problem back in 2020, if you're interested in knowing a lot more about this topic. But in essence, it's possible to map out a protein, but figuring out how that protein then folds in 3 dimensions is not obvious or easy. And historically, it could take years to figure out that final folded shape for just a single protein. DeepMind figured out a way to predict how proteins would fold using AI, which in turn allows us to better predict what proteins do and could do, which subsequently allows us to do all kinds of whiz-bang new things, like target pollution with novel molecules, and figure out malaria vaccine candidates within a computer simulation. And from Barron's, Botswana hits historic UN goal against HIV. Botswana has become the second nation globally to eradicate AIDS within its borders, according to a new report by the United Nations. Eswatini was the first nation to accomplish this goal, but Botswana's accomplishment is especially impressive, as about 1 in 5 people in the country have HIV, and they were able to make 95% of citizens with HIV aware of their status, get 98% of those diagnosed with HIV on medication, and suppress the virus in the blood of 98% of those on treatment, all of which far outperform the global average for such efforts, and which put the country on track to end its HIV epidemic by 2030. If you're finding some value in One Sentence News, consider leaving a quick review wherever you get your podcasts and/or sharing the show with a friend. You can find out more about this show or subscribe to the email version at onesentencenews.com. And you can support this and other related projects, like the Let's Know Things and Brain Lenses podcasts, at understandery.com.